This is to address the idea that Gail Burston's Genocide Codex was a beautiful plan. And I assume that the people who have sandbagged against identifying what she did are party to this idea that it's a beautiful plan. Let's talk for a moment about how I was put into position by the organization responsible. If you want to read about who was involved, read the obituary of Ralph Todd, Tibe. He was a prime mover of the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania and well learned in international cinema and media lore. And my neighbor growing up. I was deafened and treated to very unfortunate abuses. And I became of a mind to believe myself isolated, stepped on, and marginalized. And as a deaf person who is ridiculed in the city of Pittsburgh by people who were trafficking me, it was reinforced that I would never amount to anything and was an insignificant and unwanted individual whom they brushed off and at best tolerated, subjecting me at every turn to ridicule and humiliation. And this is a condition that some of the people in the deaf community recognized as a Pittsburgh provincial norm when it came to deaf people. I didn't realize how much I knew because I was walling myself off in books, in among classmates who were excelling, who could hear, and teachers who were teaching what I was reading because the classes passed by me without my understanding what was being said. And I began writing poetry in my notebooks and a story called The Heaven and Hell Odyssey. Meanwhile, psychologists began whisper campaigns. Classmates began whisper campaigns. One of them started a band called Whisper and published an album called Pigeonhole. And he was a friendly type. He worked for Mr. Rogers' infinitely friendly neighborhood. He burned two girls' arms gangrenous with a hot poker from a fireplace. But these were provincial norms. And meanwhile, people who had baited the operation knew or suspected that I was in what they called a too good of a position, that I had a cultural currency I wasn't aware of as the father, divorced father who had abandoned me, of a philosopher of education. They also might have noticed that when I did speak up, I spoke up very intelligently. They'd often laugh at things I said. So the traumatic experiences after we moved got smothered in marijuana smoke. And beggars can't be choosers in the Pittsburgh deaf community. You take what friends come your way. Isolation is already very heavy when you're deaf. So um, they organized a scroll, which they consider. So this is what they consider beautiful, a beautiful plan. And they're going to snap their fingers and awaken me to my condition in the Truman Show. Now you have a sexual nomenclatura. Polly Saltonstall from Harvard, magna cum thaws from CMU Drama with Ming-Na Wen, Oliver Stone, all of them gathering media like the filmmakers from Last Temptation. Penis Gabriel was writing to me. Mel Gibson's father lived nearby with my primary tormentors. And of course, they were robbing me. They were stealing anything they could get their hands on from me. Well, saying that anything that I learned from them was officially copywritten spiritual theft. So this is how they set up their workshop. Now, the gang responsible, Berger and the Broadway cast of Hair and the Godspell people at CMU were from Pittsburgh. The drummer for the Talking Heads was a neighbor of one of the principals in this gang. So they knew what sexual protest was because they set up sexual protests during the Vietnam War after assassinating Martin Luther King and the two Kennedys. They turned from a suit and tie condition of leadership for civil rights and human rights and dignity and equality in education and recognition, community exchange, diplomatic development, into leadership of lemmings in sex, drugs, and rock and roll, what they called Revolution Number 9. So the sandbaggers from the left, from Israeli media, from Iranian media, from Lebanese media, the sandbaggers from the organized group of people for whom Palestinians are quite rightly a line of defense, see Palestinians as good victims of genocide, whereas the victims of the prior attack, the AIDS attack, were not so good victims of genocide, not the place where they want to make a stand. Well, I was in library science, the American Library Association. I was positioned as a Falk Medical Library clerk in 1984. When my father died, I had been tortured. I thought there was a long shot chance of getting, I take that back, there was a obscure hope that Nuremberg laws could be evoked against, I guess Nuremberg laws is what came from Hitler's Germany's point, dictionary. And what I mean is the war crimes trial, the Geneva Convention, could be evoked against the AIDS attack if the perpetrators could be found. So the sexual nomenclature say, when is sexual protest a red line in and of itself? And they cluck and jabber. Well, they set it up so that any woman who I was in love with has to be taken away so that you can see the suffering of a neuroplasm, because to begin with, if you believe in sex out of wedlock, you're not entitled to wedlock. You're not entitled to be in love with somebody and have love reciprocated. So that was a given. And they all said, let's observation the queer bait, which is what they called me, and see if he is healing correctly. So I would fall in love, and then they would arrange to have me kicked in the head and rejected. And then they would observation me. One of the most brutal attackers when I was in childhood was permitted to write for the whole crowd of these sandbaggers and sexual nomenclature, the people from Harvard he spoke for, the people from Pink Floyd he spoke for. He spoke most especially for Paul McCartney. He wrote an article about food fighting in local government. Well, the KKK that he belonged to is an ally of the Black Panthers because primarily Pittsburgh Catholic. The NAACP, Dr. Proctor, Nelson Harrison are very big on Pittsburgh Catholic. I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you're queuing for food at a food kitchen, but they play Clint Eastwood Hollywood games with the food. They arrange things like 2 drops of milk to signify two virgins next to a plate. They do a lot of these things that Pittsburgh Catholic has thought up, and it appeals to the KKK and the NAACP, who are partners in this venture. So food fighting is an exquisitory norm, an exquisitory focal point of study. They watch what you don't eat, that you dare to not eat something that looks like colored greens, gets the hive really buzzing. So these are the sort of weapons of psychological warfare that, I mean, they went so far as to poison me in the mouth, literally, with something horrifying, bat feces or something. And so food fighting is part of their beautiful idea. That's beautiful. Poison somebody is beautiful, man. Beautiful. What a beautiful plan. Because various factions, well, how many abortions is it before he deserves to be aborted? How many adulteries before he is endorsing his own destruction as a person who longs to be loved? How many one night stands before we get to castrate him? And ultimately, what does he have to do before we get to poach him entirely with HIV infection, which is their seething, sickening goal? I mean, they just seethe with this idea. That's the ultimate purpose of their beautiful, beautiful plan. And Two Virgins was a pun on second coming, which is spelled differently in pornography. And this was their mind. They dared to say this was my mind. I had to detect these things. And they were saying the persona is subjected to the theft of degradations of the X motive, subjected to successive degradation of the X motive. And I'm not supposed to sleep with these people to find out what's going on. And they always said, no, it ain't none of that shit, man. We love you. We dig you. You need a place to sleep. The girl loves you, man. You know, she loves you. She loves you. She gives you a place to sleep. You got a roof over your head with this girl, man. Meanwhile, they're playing porno, peep, extermination warfare. This is the Jeffin Corporation, the Clintons, the Reagans, who I proved were involved in the assassination of JFK, the Bushes, Obamas. I mean, the Obamas were whoopee doopy doopy doopy. This is voodoo therapy for the wonderful black warriors of the Heinz family. And this is what they did. And it comes from the mind Pius Gabriel. A makeup psychotic Ripper Hatter from the rock industry who thinks he's the God's gift to Stephen Biko. Kamala Harris, God's gift to democracy. Clarence Thomas, God's gift to the American judiciary. And God knows how many Russian intellectuals went along with this standard of beauty. So, and they refuse to talk about it. They're like, no, 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 no. Don't tell children that they're being trafficked, that they're being targeted, that they're being pimped by the police force and the local sheriff and military fight clubs from the U.S. Army. We will not allow you to address those issues in school. Don't tell them that the people who torture and gas you are Israelis running special education programs in Holocaust experience parks, man. That's what Felix Gabriel called a genocide demonstration. He called it an experience park, man. So we get experience park by COVID-19, man. And these people spent $20 billion on bombs to help Israel bomb Gaza, and they think they're cute for going along with Paul McCartney. All these sandbaggers, so-called defenders of Palestine, even among the Palestinians, think they're cute for going along with Paul McCartney. Sin war, holy war, Sinfield, Death Seed. It's a farce. $20 billion could have taken care of the world's water supply. I mean, that we could have had clean water piping networks around the world. At least we could have made great progress. And we go $1 trillion into debt for some insane idea of the Christian right wing that they're going to force Jesus to come back with nuclear weapons. Jesus, you better come back. You better come back now, because we're going to bomb the world to make you come back. When they could be preventing children from being murdered in mass. And they have this idea that what they did was ethno-equity. Who did they use as their symbol? Was Joseph Goebbels. And yet the NAACP in Pittsburgh Public Schools, Pitt News, the Country Repertoire Theater, the Black Panthers line up behind this picture of Joseph Goebbels and say it's justified. Justified. Because Robert Fripp puts on his spinner beanie and says virginity proves rape. And they go, wow, that is so awesome. Where did you get that? And they say, from Martin Anderman, man, the Zionist kingpin of the city of Pittsburgh and Wells Fargo. He said Tom Gordon, Leslie Katz, they were all like this. And Leslie Katz mongered her tongue on the tongue of the queer bait, while Tommy Gordon played the music of Don't You Wish You Had the Strength to Overpower Her Resistance? And she was a Shylock, and they were reading Rape of the Lock. They had this guy named Exler who said, don't blow it, you blew it, man. And all I did was take consideration of her willingness, which was coy. And when she was reluctant, I backed off. Oh my God. Oh my God, that proves rape. She's still a virgin. And Martin Anderman was going, don't stop, don't stop. And that was his whole contribution to the whole thing. He would do that every chance he got. And Pitt Law said, there's a difference between no and no. And this is how they played their beautiful plan on a neurological implant from Bernard Wattenmaker, which had me in seizures because I couldn't remember the day that they kidnapped me, when they found me wandering around in the freezing cold snow, afraid to go to school. And Penis Gabriel says that's rape because of the rapid eye movement caused by the neuroplasm. And blinking comes out, must kill Quirrell. Blinking, he's really blinking.